Hey, everybody, Rabbi Bill Hamilton here, and I'm back with our teachers, Rabbi David Starr, and our rabbinic intern, Deborah Ann Standig, and we are back for Well Versed this week. Took a week off and looking forward to thinking about this week's portion, specifically Abraham as warrior, who is very heroic on the battlefield. And when he's offered appreciation, a kind of spoil of war, if you will, he refuses. When the king of Sodom, one of the kings engaged in the battle that happens in this week's portion, offers him as a sign of gratitude some wealth, Abraham says, I'm not going to take so much as a sandal strap, so that somehow you would say that I made Abraham, you made me rich in some way. And that becomes the very, very powerful ethic that warfare is the worst condition humankind can know. Horrible things happen in war, and we should never, ever benefit from it. Juxtaposing that with the dream that Abraham, the vision that is God gives him in the deep sleep, that his descendants will someday be oppressed and be slaves in a land not their own. God will judge ultimately those oppressors, that's the Egyptians and Pharaoh, and bring them forth birchush gadol, with great wealth. And so the question is, how do we relate to these two very different approaches to wealth and well, I suppose a livelihood that comes out of very, very dark and difficult times? How do we reconcile these two very, very interesting approaches?
It's interesting because on the one hand, both the conflict that Abraham was involved in with the king of Sodom and the 4 and the 5 kings is a war. And the story of the Exodus from Egypt doesn't quite feel like a war. It's a time of the ultimate narrative of our people, the Exodus of Egypt, where a goal of that narrative is to make God's name known in the world, known to the Egyptians, and every event through each of the plagues leading to the ultimate leaving of the Israelites leaving Egypt is all about showing the presence of God in the world. And so to me, they feel different. I'm struck by those of you who know the 10 Commandments when Yul Brynner at the end, the 1950s version, the Charlton Heston film, when Yul Brynner comes back having watched the Egyptians drown at the sea, he announces his God, meaning the God of Moses, is God. And so the experience of wealth, of taking from the Egyptians, feels like the end result of God's presence being known in the world. The battle between the battle of the multiple kings doesn't have the same valence to me. And Abram's concern is actually about the perception of the king of Sodom, that you shouldn't say, I am responsible for Abram's wealth. And as Avram is learning to represent God, and in this parsha we know be a blessing of God in the world, he can't take from another person because his job is to name for everyone, my wealth comes from God. What we're doing is that's the project, not for you to give to me. So I'm struck by thinking about this really kind of compelling comparison and kind of the similarities and differences between them.
How does the Torah put it? This sort of battle of, what do the nations really want from Israel? Do they want rechush or nefesh? I'm just blocking on where that is exactly, but I think Jews have always had a healthy sense, obviously enriched, pardon the pun, by life in a long diaspora, that you're not going to survive in a cave. You're not going to survive without rechush. Jews have always been very kind of hard-nosed pragmatists. We paid a very big price for that in terms of polemics around capitalism or socialism and anti-Semitism. But the point is, we've always had, I think, a very intuitive sense that wealth is a tool. The kinds of things that Rabbi Heschel wrote about in terms of the importance of self-transcendence, that was in some ways just a much older theme in Jewish life that said the point is not to freak out about wealth. The point is, what does it say about your capacity to cultivate your soul? If it gets in the way of that, that's a problem. If it enhances that through, building schools and helping people in need and doing acts of loving kindness, that's what counts. So, I mean, to me, this is sort of an early chapter in that ongoing struggle of, what does it mean to save your soul or lose your soul? And obviously, since Deborah mentioned one of her favorite movies, I'll mention one of my favorite movies, which is Wall Street. The character played by Hal Holbrook, who's actually Oliver Stone's father, who was in real life a really successful stockbroker in Wall Street. He has this kind of moment of truth with the Charlie Sheen figure, and he says, but the problem with money is it makes you do things you don't want to do. So the point is, it's not really about wealth. It's really about what do you do with it and what does it do to you?
Right.
So again, I mean, all communities have to struggle with this. And I think it's wonderful that the Torah has such a rich sense of the importance of work and accumulation and families arguing about money, et cetera, because this is these are the ways in which peoples and communities, in effect, kind of announce to themselves and to the world, this is really what we value.
And in that regard, we look forward to learning a lot about Abraham and Sarah and their descendants this week and in the weeks to come. I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.